Welcome, thinkers, to Season 3, Episode 7. Today's topic is adaptation. And today I'm joined once more by Manny. Thank you ever so much for joining us today, Manny. Can you tell us again a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Manny at Up Geek on most of the social medias, if not all. I'm just a regular 42-year-old dad who also streams some Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition on Twitch. Long-term campaigns, one of which is an adventure module, which is kind of the talk of the day. And one of them, ironically enough, is also a homebrew. So,
Okay. And of course, for those that have maybe joined us more recently, Manny, you previously joined us, well, hopefully by the time this goes out, almost a year ago to the day for Season 1, Episode 8 on emotion. So, yeah, you're a veteran of the show.
Yes, and things coming full circle as well.
Yes, indeed. However, the topic of today's is adaptation. So, what does that mean to you in the D&D framework?
For me, one of the things is that I feel in the kind of niches of like the Dungeons & Dragons community, there's this kind of negative connotation to the adventure module. And at the end of the day, I think it's unfair. You know, I've come to praise the adventure module, not to bury it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what they've had is like poor adaptation of an adventure module, and that has painted their opinion thereof. And I think that adapting things, whether it's movies or adventure modules, is part of the fun and the challenge. And there's a bunch of great things that could come from it. And if people would just let it be, not kind of just denigrate the adventure module as a concept, like constantly,
Mm-hmm.
or to look at homebrew as like the superior version in those circles of the internet community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think you're absolutely right. I'm, as you're aware, my long form campaign is homebrew, and I didn't make that choice because I thought published and mentioned module was bad. I made that choice because, in my arrogance, I thought I could do things better, which is obviously, patently incorrect half the time. But so you say that there's a bit of a negative connotation around them, which I'm inclined to agree with. A lot of the grapevine seems to lean that way, and you mentioned it's because people have had a poor experience with how that module's been adapted. So have you got any, what are those kind of poor adaptations, and what are those kind of poor modifications that lead to that bad taste left in the players' mouths?
So when I was on the first time, we were talking about emotion, and one of my big cornerstone thoughts in that is the idea of emotional investment from your players to get them invested in more than just whatever the scribbling on the cover says, adventure in Icewind Dale,
Mm-hmm.
Tomb of Annihilation, whatever. That if, because of the way Wizards of the Coast operates, and this is just a business producing mass media in a small way, and saying that you have to make this attractive or palatable to as many people as possible. And not every table is the same, obviously. Not every dungeon master is the same. So the pre-published adventure is essentially a starting point for what could be an amazing campaign for your table, but you have to be willing to do some work with it as well. It is not perfect right from opening the book, running it cover to cover. I don't know that they're designed for that. And so if that's how they are run for you, just your plot hooks are your own, there's no personal narrative for the characters, then it's very going to be run of the mill, and your actions affect the story, but not your character growth or anything. And that's one of the things that probably, whether you know it or not, is missing maybe if you've run an adventure module and you didn't enjoy it, that there was no investment back in your character because they're just not written that way. And it's not fair to expect wizards to, handle that. That's the dungeon. That's where the dungeon master comes in to make an adventure module enjoyable and targeted at your players, not everybody who's going to buy this book. And I think that's where the concept of adaptation and the willingness to do so, or at least the acknowledgement that you have to do that, is where people kind of come off of adventure modules and just expect them to be perfect right out of the bag and go, hey, why isn't this great? I'm doing exactly what it says. They wanted $50 for this. Why isn't this working? Why are my players not having a good time?
Yeah. Why aren't we having fun? I specifically requested it.
That's exactly the meme. I paid the requisite $50. Where's our fun?
I think everybody who I've spoken to about the published adventure modules, whatever side of the fence they sit on, their common theme is you always have to adapt them and be that in large amounts, to be like, instead of it being in this location, it's in some other location, and in fact the big bad is this other person that I'm going to bring in. Or if it's in a small amount of just being like, that NPC is actually one of the players' brothers, and they, the starting village, they're actually going to start in this other starting village where one of the other PCs grew up. But there's always an element of adapting that published adventure module to fit that particular game. Here's a thought then. Here's a question that I've had since we've been talking. Maybe for newer DM, I know, I'm not expecting a newer DM just to rock up with like Tomb of Annihilation or whatever and be like, I guess I'll run this because that's probably gonna be tricky.
Sure.
to put it kindly. But do you still think there's a bit of for newer DMs to just expect it to be laid out for them? And if so, is that not a failing somewhere in the system? Should maybe the books be a bit more explicit about like, I'm reticent to say like DM skill level because it's such a weird subjective abstract thing.
I get what it goes back to the old, original stuff of basic rules, advanced rules, expert rules, maybe a softer, more, modern kind of take on that. And I think that's an idea. Go ahead, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that was it. You spared me from trying to communicate it, but no, it was broadly like, I don't know, it just feels like precisely why you said that there's negative connotations, because a lot of people happen to fall into that trap. So it feels like if it's such an obvious trap, shouldn't there be something somewhere to say, be careful, there's a trap here? And why isn't that been resolved? Or perhaps it has, and I'm just looking at a very small set of anecdotal evidence.
I haven't read it in too much depth, and I'm not going to try to give away too many spoilers, but potentially for the newest one, Witchlight, the Feywild one, is that this one, so lately Wizards has been experimenting with kind of like the MCU, where they do their adventure modules and they're very Dungeons and Dragons, but they also get like a subgenre, a lot like the MCU movies did.
Yeah.
Winter Soldier is more of a political thriller. Along those veins. So they've been experimenting like with formats and with the kind of narratives that they've been telling, which is, I think it's just amazing. And supposedly in Witchlight, one of the formats is that one of the draws of it is that they want to have every encounter be able to be resolved without combat. And as a result, because it's kind of woven into the system, they have explicit outcomes of encounters. Players decide to kill, do this. Players decide to do this non-violently. Here are kind of the requisites that need to be met in order for this to kind of be satisfactory, adjudicated, without it just being the DM's discretion going, yeah, sure, you bribe the the satyr or whatever. And so that maybe just because it hasn't been done, and as it's tried to reach, seriously, a much more accessible point in its existence. I think that may be the wave of the future. 5e adventure modules are, I think, way more dense with things than some of the older editions are. Some of the older editions read like a 30-page novella with a reference to stat blocks, and that's pretty much it. This is the story. The players will do this, they will then go here, and there's not the same kind of like just grand built out things that in older editions that there are in 5e.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had heard that about Witchlight, and that every encounter was meant to be resolvable non-violently, which is a very, that's a very vogue thing, and it has been for quite some time, and certainly in video games, like games like Dishonored and stuff, where you can pick to incapacitate rather than kill people and all that kind of stuff. It's obviously something people like and want, so it makes sense to bring that in. Is it true that literally every encounter in the book is applicable to that? Can be resolved without combat?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe that there is a basic kind of rule set at the beginning of the book where they give you, the preamble before the adventure proper starts. I think there's something in there about it, and then as it to potentially more, significant narrative portions of the adventure, they might be specifically listed for, whatever the equivalent of a boss encounter is, or surely whatever they come up with for a Fey Carnival themed adventure is going to have some new wrinkles and new ideas in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just trying to think, like, I don't know where I sit with that, because on one hand, I'm like, it doesn't sit quite well with me that it's so prescriptive in the outcomes, but on the other hand, it's like you said, like it's super accessible and everybody can have a shot at it, and there's all different play styles are accounted for. So for me, I'm like, it's kind of less romantic in a way, that there's it's been demystified. You get to see behind the screen a little bit more if they explicitly say how to circumvent these encounters without the DM having to perhaps adapt on the fly to deftly bring us back on topic.
I think that it's also just that it's relatively new as a concept.
Yeah. And
so to see it written out, even just once, just to see, hey, this is what, the design team, I'm sure Jeremy Crawford is involved. This is what the design team and Jeremy Crawford feel like is balanced as non-violent ways of resolving these issues. Maybe just to kind of give everybody a baseline. We've never seen it at least in 5e, maybe in some of the older ones. You've never seen it expressly written out that this is what it should, or what, we deem a satisfactory conclusion. So I think that as a baseline, and just to go, hey, if you ever want to see what, Wizards of the Coast thinks is suitable for non-violent resolution, go look at Witchlight and go see these things, and then from there adapt those to your specific situation.
Yeah, I think that's consider my mind changed. Changed my view. So on that matter. So I know that you have streamed and are currently streaming and plan to stream in the future published adventure modules. How much adaptation have you done to those?
I am also an odd advocate for the pre-published adventure modules, as I will fully admit to using them as a framework at best. I like my narratives very focused on my players, and so I, for the most part, keep large set pieces, locations, and the general framework of the narrative as a whole. We're running Icewind Dale now, so the Frost Maiden's Curse, the major set pieces in and around through the adventure, we kept, but everything kind of in between the set pieces is where we did our character arcs, our character stories. So it's two ideas smashed into one with, if anything has to give, it's actually the narrative from the adventure module.
Okay, yeah, I like that. How you stitch in, as we were talking about earlier on, the bit that can turn people off is that there's none of that character. What's the word I'm looking for? Not interactivity, but integration into the world. If you just do the published modules verbatim, so I like that you've stitched them in between, and that kind of it immediately solves that problem. If you give it time to breathe, you give the players time to breathe and have those interactions and do their little personal career side quests, their side goals.
So it does take a certain amount of time. One of my players, tomorrow's episode 37, which, like I said, will be the final episode. We'll have the final encounter and do all that. But one of my characters did not get his backstory character arc interwoven into the narrative until 3 episodes ago.
Okay.
Others got them relatively early. It just where it fit within the kind of frame. I look at Icewind Dale as, an entire series of boxes that you string together. And I leave them as they are, except where I need to take them out because I need to put something in there. So as wherever I kind of fit this, where are they going to be? What's going on? All right. Orin's story is going to be here. Baldur's story is going to be over here. And at the beginning, as a new streamer, I'm just hoping that everybody sticks around long enough to see their character arc. And they all did. And it was great. They've really enjoyed it. I think from a player's perspective, the adventure module is great. As a player, for the most part, kind of what you're getting. Somebody has seen this. This isn't just somebody making it up, sight unseen, nobody having ever read it before. Entire trust. Somebody's selling this and making money off of it. So if somebody willing to say, hey, I'm going to run Rime of the Frost Maiden, you at least get to know, all right, it's at least decent enough. This isn't something that's incoherent and makes no sense.
Yeah. Very DIY.
Yeah. And it's great. We've had a lot of fun. We changed a lot. I changed a lot. Just, I wanted it to be about them. And it's just, it's hard to do. There's a lot of kind of narrative issues with the module. You don't find out until you're a couple of months in, that if you notice it, then maybe your players notice it. So you have to go about kind of fixing things you didn't know were broken until they happen. And that can be fun. It's kind of an impromptu. They're going to ask a question about something that happened 20 sessions ago. And you'll be like, oh man, I don't remember what happened with that. Okay, here we go.
Yep.
Adapting on the fly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that segue, because I was going to say, like, we've talked quite a lot now about the, changing adventure modules and ways to do that. And I think the key takeaway from that is get the players invested and get their characters integrated is probably the single sentence silver bullet for improving the quality of life of your published adventures. Now, you mentioned there about adapting to your players, and I kind of broadly think about that from a DM's perspective in kind of 2 ways, split down the middle. So micro and macro. So what I mean by that is kind of moment to moment, adapting to literally responding to the player's actions and putting up with their weird and wacky requests or actions or this, that, and the other. And then the macro side of things is integrating backstories and, having NPCs pop up from their past and that kind of stuff. So how do you, as a long time DM with plenty of experience, what are your kind of thoughts and tips and tricks on that kind of micro moment to moment adapting as a DM to maybe, tips for newer DMs that are just kind of like, shit, I see so many posts online that are like, I'm DMing for the first time tomorrow and I'm hella scared. Like, what do I do? And what would you say to that person?
The obvious advice is that not everybody has to be Matt Mercer. That's clear. Number one, everybody's in this for a good time. Just, relax. And be the dungeon master you always wanted to have is the advice like I always give people. And it's okay to say, if your players surprise you, first of all, enjoy that feeling. It's a very cool thing. As the dungeon master, the more experience you get, you've played out a pretty decent amount of scenarios of how your players could react to something, especially the longer you've known them.
Mm-hmm.
So when they do surprise you, first of all, enjoy that. It's this very cool feeling. I love the hell out of it. And then it is perfectly okay. You are probably not running a live Twitch stream, and even if you are, it's okay to say, hey, I really got taken aback by that. I would like a minute to figure out what happens next. That is a completely valid and mature way almost of expressing that. Just be honest. You don't have to think at the split second and come up with the best scenario. There's nothing that says you have to do that. Take a moment, give the time and the thought to being fair to that moment by coming up with something genuine and thought out, even if it's 2 minutes of think. You don't have to reply in the moment. If you would like to, if you know your group well, that is unbelievably helpful in a lot of regards. You just kind of go with it. They will enjoy it, and they most likely trust you if you've been together for a long time. And if you are good at improv, it's a skill. The longer you do this, you will get better at it. You absolutely will.
Yeah.
Some of the improv moments are the really exciting moments for a dungeon master. When you absolutely, in the blink of an eye, know, or things maybe just start coming out of your mouth without thought and reaction. Those are some of the most fun times. It's great when they obviously realize you did it and it turned out great. It's even better when they don't realize you improv'd and you just turn that hamster on the wheel in your head really quickly and came up with something awesome. That's going to come with experience. Knowing your group is a help. So don't stress that part. It's awesome, and it's one of those things people really enjoy, and one of the things DMs most brag about and players really kind of go crazy about. It's not necessary. It is a luxury on top of the already fun thing that is playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's the point. All that other stuff is bonus. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to want it. Enjoy it when it happens, but you are not less than or not worthy of being a dungeon master because you're not super quick on your feet. There's a lot of skills involved in this. And if you don't have them all, it's not the end of the world.
No, I couldn't agree more. Pretty much everything you said there, I agree with a huge amount. And it's the things I remember from my campaign, which is now like 60, 70 sessions long. The things I remember most are those moments where I've gone, oh, okay, and I've been completely caught off guard, as it were, by players doing something that I hadn't. And you're exactly right about like I think it's human nature for DMs to try and at least anticipate the Pareto, the likely course of action, the likely 2, 3, 4 courses of action that the players are going to take. I think that's just common sense to a certain extent, to at least anticipate them. So when the players don't do those 2, 3, 4 actions, it is very much a light bulb moment, I guess. You're not having an idea, but you're having something, and it is, that is a very, very exciting time to be. And I personally am very attached to that kind of like immediate feedback loop of, something surprising happens and I'm literally in the hot seat having to react and adapt to it, and then there being immediate feedback from the players as to, okay, that might have missed the mark a little bit, or that's rubbed them up the wrong way. Let me dynamically adjust that background. That is what gets me out of bed on a day that I'm DMing. And another piece that I wanted to add there, where you talked about, taking 5 minutes or however long to think, of a response or an outcome, or the outcome of a dice roll, or the response of an NPC to a particular question. I think that feels like it's one of those things that every DM does, but it's one of those also things that newer DMs think that it's such a bad, like, God, I just have to be responsive. And the answer is like, no, man. Literally every DM will do that. Probably more often than you realize. Podcasts can be edited, so any silence just disappears. And likewise, so can YouTube videos and stuff. So there is an adage that for D&D, no game is better than a bad game. And what people mean by that is that, like, the bad, a lot of people have bad experiences with D&D, and it's because they're, it's a toxic environment. They're playing with horrible people. The DM has some weird and different play styles that maybe aren't what you're after, and that leaves, again, people with a very bad taste in their mouth, and then maybe might not try the hobby again because they've gone, well, that's what it was, and it wasn't really for me, so I guess I don't want to do it anymore. So that's like the worst possible outcome. And in those instances, it's like, no, it's worth to wait and find a good match for you, but just be patient. And the same can be said as a DM to responding to those answers. So no answer or a delayed response is better than a bad hodgepodge response that you've just pulled out your backside because you felt like you had to. And I've done it. I've done it 100 times and been like, shit, shouldn't have said that, or I've let
you want it back.
Yes.
And you feel it's even worse if your players are invested, because if they're invested and you who hold all the cards, as it were, as the dungeon master, if you give out something, especially if it's an important moment, like it's really unfair to your players. I'm not judging you because I've done it too, and I've felt terrible about it. And to avoid those moments, there's nothing wrong with going, hey, give me a second. Everybody who's maybe newish to the hobby has come to it from viewing it as something presented on the internet, and it, come to have that as the expectation of the way it is, where a home game is absolutely nothing like that. It is not even close. You do not have 5 people sitting in the exact same spot for 3 hours. Like, everybody's up and moving around, and it's a more dynamic thing. And plenty of times, everybody will say, hey, hold on one second. I have to go to the bathroom, and the game stops. And that's a very valid thing, and nobody ever says that's not a thing. So for the DM to say, hey, we're going to stop the game for a second so I can give you, a reasonable and hopefully enjoyable outcome to this, that's not... There's nothing written down that says that that's a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I very much get lost and can't see the wood for the trees when I'm deep in the DM zone. So it's so valuable just to be like, let me just take a hot minute just to take a few deep breaths and be like, hang on, let me look at the bigger picture here, because what I'm about to say could impact the next 10, 20 sessions or however long. So it does, especially with like dice rolls. I think a trick that I actually use as a DM for responding to dice rolls, I'd say like middling importance dice rolls, is I'm I guess fortunate in this case to have a large group of 6 players, so often a couple of them are doing a whole bunch of stuff simultaneously. So it's very easy for me to be like, okay, yeah, Royther, roll me a perception check and we'll come back to you in a second. And I can just put that to one side and kind of forget about that. And that's my special trick while I go and deal with the other players and sort them stuff out. And often that's all I need, is just a little bit of time just to be like, okay, what I kind of put it on the like a sub process in my brain. So my main consciousness is playing the game, and then in the back it's always just ticking over at like 20% efficiency of just like the results of that perception check. So when I eventually go back to Royther and go, oh yeah, so what did you roll? Okay, you see XYZ, and I've already kind of got it queued up because I've spent that time, which during playtime haha, no one can see. It's a very Machiavellian moment for me, because I'm just, oh, look at all these plates I'm having to spin. Sorry, guys. In reality, I'm going, I need to answer that. Perception check. Quick, distract, divert attention.
I've done that exact thing. You use it as like a narrative cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, while you sit there and stew about whether you know how this dice roll is going to go, let's cut back to something else so I can look like we're doing this for narrative effect, but really I need to figure this out. And rather, I was like, here's the behind the curtains DM magic. It just like anything else. Misdirection. Hey, look over here, and ignore the fact that over here I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's a perfect crime because nobody knows.
Look who pulled a nickel out from behind your ear. Ta-da!
Yep. So that's I guess that's my one of my little tricks and tactics for adapting to players. But again, just to repeat what you mentioned earlier on about that. Try and learn to look forward to and to appreciate those surprise moments, because that's why we're playing these role-playing games, is to have that dynamic surprise moments. It's not just a series of linear.
Yeah, it's not the alphabet A to Z and yay we got to Z, yay us.
Yeah. It's not just a linear of predetermined events. It's the whole point is that everybody, including the DM, is along for the journey and is surprised by the meander that the river takes along that way. And I mean, I'm certainly hyped. I've not DM'd for a month because of various scheduling issues. Now I've hyped myself up for tomorrow night, so I'm happy with this chat today.
Yeah, I will say I used the end of my show. I try to end every episode on like a cliffhanger. I model it after like television. Mm-hmm. And honestly, the most surprising thing that's happened thus far was in our 30th episode, our pacifist cleric killed essentially their consistent NPC companion, who was there for kind of the lore dumps and part of the narrative. And she served many purposes, both narratively and, in the mechanics for me. And she was not a pleasant person, but not evil. And my pacifist cleric had just had enough of her like denigrating the party and being condescending, and killed her with spiritual weapon.
Oh. And
I remember everybody watching it in Zoom as we're doing the show, just jaw dropped. As soon as the show was over, I went back and I screen captured exactly that moment. It's clear as day. Everybody except him just mouth agape, and it was great. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking as it's happening, wow, this is really great. Also, thank God this is the end of the episode, because I absolutely do not have anything to do. And I was like, wow, look at that. What a great ending to an episode. We'll see everybody next week. And was just like, wow, I absolutely dodged a bullet there. Mm-hmm. It was within character to an extent. So it wasn't just, that's what my character would do. It was a legit move and everything. And just everybody just was shocked, and it was magnificent. And like I said, I definitely would not have been able to do the moment justice if it had happened 10 minutes into an episode. We would have absolutely gone to a break. Be like, look, man, I know you just tuned in. It's 10 minutes into the show.
Be right back.
I absolutely need a minute. So I got bailed out there, which I like to this day. I just look back on that and just like, wow, I could not have given it the proper moment that it needed. So the next episode we pick up like right after she dies, but a much more narrative telling of it that, kind of built the next episode from there. And I was glad that I had a week between the shows to really give that moment justice. Mm.
Yeah, count your blessings you had that, man, because I'm just thinking now of all the poor DMs out there where that stuff, as you said, like happens, midway or right at the beginning, and they're just like, uh-oh. But I wanted to say what the secret sauce there, that the really good, juicy part of D&D for me is that Venn diagram with the two circles, and in one circle you have this is what my character would do, and on the other circle you have doesn't harm anybody and progresses the story in a way that makes sense and adds more narrative beats. Where those two circles overlap is that's the sweet spot. That's where where basically all players should be trying to aim for that balance of hitting that middle of that Venn diagram of this makes sense in character. It was feasibly something that they would do, but isn't a detriment to the rest of the game and isn't stepping on anyone's toes and pushes the narrative forward. That is the gold dust that we should all be striving for.
We had a level 17 one-shot, Assault on Mount Celestia, where they went and fought the gods, just because.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah, it's if you can do a high-level one-shot where everybody's like, it's levels, by tier 3, tier 4, you're basically a god. Okay, cool, we're going to go fight the gods there. And we did it by domain. The last episode, the domain was peace. And you assume level 17, high level, people want to do their really cool high level abilities.
Yeah.
They pick this character on purpose. They might not get to see it at this high level very often. So, you build the thing and you're fighting gods, like we said. And my entire party came built for the domain of peace by trying not to fight. The entire episode, the embracing power fantasy episode, go fight the gods. Mm-hmm. They insisted on being peaceful and not punishing the perpetrators and this other thing. And it was so much fun. It completely wrecked my ending. It was a one shot, so it was a little more linear than the campaign. Yeah. But it absolutely wrecked everything I had prepared. Just obliterated it. I might as well have just gathered 4 people off the street and be like, hey, listen to me tell a story for 3 hours. And it was so much fun. And it was a surprise that took place over almost 4 hours. Mm-hmm. Okay. Eventually they're going to kind of go back to the whole reason why we're here in the meta. Let's kill some gods. Let's go nuts. Let's use those tier 4 abilities. And they stuck to it the entire time. And I had to adapt to this thing from the jump. About halfway through, I was like, they're gonna do this. They're about it. This is what they came to do. And completely unprepared for the ending. You vanquish the evil god, everybody wins. Mm-hmm. It's a great moment. You get to say you killed a god, how often? And these people are like, nope. We're gonna forgive the god and do this thing. And so for 3 hours, I just got to be, wow, they're just gonna keep going with this. All right, maybe eventually they'll come around. And no. And then one of the positive improv moments of my Dungeon Master career, whatever that may be, completely improv the ending, and they loved it. It was a huge relief. It was hopefully the give back to them for me spending 4 hours completely surprised that hopefully the ending to them was satisfactory, because I got to be surprised for 4 hours. And as a DM, let's be honest, that doesn't happen. It doesn't for the most part. Chaos, yes, but just straightforward, sticking to their characters, which I should have known they would have done. And I spent 3 hours or 4 hours adapting to this with a grand payoff at the end and go, I got away with it. That could have gone horribly wrong. But I had 3 hours to prepare for them just to go, all right, man, they're just going to do this the whole way. So you better come up with a peaceful ending where they don't kill the god. And it worked out. And it was an amazing time just to watch them stick to their character and have, like I said, to have to adapt for an entire one shot, making it up as I go, basically, because they just wouldn't fight. It was great.
That is, man, I'm impressed, because I guess the stakes are slightly lower if you've got the safety net of, well, we've got an infinite number of sessions after this one. So if I don't do a great job, that's fine. I can kind of fix it. But with a one shot, it's like this has to finish, and it has to be, there has to be some kind of payoff at the end.
It was the season finale to our Wednesday one-shot show, so it was even doubly that. And like I said, I wanted to send everybody out. Season 1, season finale. Watch everybody kill gods. Happiness restored.
Yeah.
Yay. And instead, I got, hey, watch them go up to Mount Celestia and talk it out. Be really forgiving and understanding, and see things from a different point of view, and maybe empathize with the villain and their frustrations. That's hard to put on the cover of an adventure module. It just isn't. Nobody's gonna buy that.
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of fun just to do it, despite the fact that I'm watching this narrative I worked on for quite a long time just completely just be set on fire. If I just lit pages of paper on fire while I was doing this, it would have been the same thing. Be like, wee! Yeah,
as they turn into dust in the breeze. Yeah,
flash paper like a magician.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot. Another metaphor there for magicians as being a DM. I think I'm slowly starting to see it's like a mirror image of each other, and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
It's part charlatan, part conman. Like the misdirection thing, I think is exceptionally fair now that I kind of realize how it works and how you can make it absolutely apply to a lot of situations in this. So yeah, I dice tricks aren't as impressive as card tricks, maybe. I don't know.
But that when people say, the magic of D&D, that phrase has another meaning to me now, which I'm quite happy with.
Watch me saw the cleric in half. Oh wait, no, not that kind. Sorry. Roll for persuasion. Then I'm sorry.
So we've mentioned and we discussed at length around this kind of moment to moment, flying by the seat of your pants. What about then, as I said before, the macro side of things, and that can be just as, although it's not quite as immediate an issue, it can be just as laden with pitfalls. And so what I mean by that is, some players are keen and eager and will write, and here's my mother, here's my brother, here's where they live, here's this, that, and the other. That was not intended to rhyme, but I'm happy it did. And then, you've got other players who are there for a different reason and are just like, yeah, I'm a dude and now I'm going adventuring, and that's fine. So how do you as a DM then kind of reconcile those two extremes? And then question 1.2 is, how do you adapt your setting, homebrew or otherwise, to accommodate those players that have put some investment in?
I think one of the important things is the idea of just having some boundaries wherever they may be. Mm-hmm. You still owe it to the rest of the group to tell, I don't want to say like your story, I hate that kind of view of it, but the story that you've crafted on your end as the dungeon master to share with your group, that I think there's a certain amount of like respect. There's always that meme where it's, a bunch of wizards and knights and everything, and then somebody's dressed like a modern clown. And, it's, the meme is like when DMs allow homebrew.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And so like at the extreme, be respectful of your DM and kind of find some way to make it work. Don't dictate, I want to play a futuristic gunslinger in a low magic setting. So I think that's just the basic one. The opposite end of that is do your best as a dungeon master to make it fit. That they want to play this character in their head, whether you see it or not. Mm-hmm. They believe this character will fit into the setting, the story, the campaign you're about to run. And I think you owe it to them to try to make it work within reason. Mm-hmm. And that's one of those parts is that you get to kind of contribute and help kind of guide this rough concept to fit your setting. It shows investment in you as the player. Player's like, wow, this guy really cares enough to kind of work with me to fit this in, despite it not being, exactly what I want. And the other thing I think is just everybody's there to have fun. Don't be so rigid about everything, and make it a place for everybody. That's the point of this. It's a group activity. And so don't just be like, nope, can't do it, won't fit it in, refuse, doesn't fit my setting.
Mm-hmm.
Find a way to make it work if you can. If it doesn't, then it just doesn't. But like I said, do your best. You owe it to these people who want to play in your game and to have fun. And like I said, who believe in their head their character fits perfectly in this thing. You just need to gear them, guide them a little bit. You're the one that kind of knows the most, and you owe it to them to try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think because it is, D&D is such a pop culture vogue thing right now. It's such a popular thing that it has a bit of weight and gravitas to it, that people treat it very delicately, when in reality just it's the same as just how you should deal with your your everyday life and your everyday human interactions, where a lot of life is meeting people in the middle, is
Sure.
having that compromise. And that's not unique to D&D. That is, as I said, that's just an element of being a functional, nice human being,
a member of human society.
Yeah, and that's that's it. That's just that basic thing that we should all learn when we're children. The same is said for D&D, and people say, "Well, no, that's that's my character, and that's how I'm going to play him." And it's like, well, no, you wouldn't go to the shop and say, "Well, I'm only going to pay half price for this," and that's that. You wouldn't. People just don't do that.
That's what Danilo would do. So, sorry, that's my reason.
Yeah, so it is just that quite it's simple in its elegance of just like as you said, it's meeting in the middle. It's I think maybe accommodation is maybe a better word than adaptation. I know that's a bit of a faux pas for today's topic, but
we can cut that out. Nobody has to know.
Completely. I'm just going to go back and hack every time we say adaptation and change it to
adaptation. Do a really bad dub.
Yeah, too. Yeah, just over it. Yeah. But yeah, that is how I think of it. It is very much that might not work as it is, but let's work together to see how we can make it. Let's see how we can make it work together. I think is basically the silver bullet in that instance, the panacea of just like, here's a world that might have some constraints, some scope. Be it a published adventure. Rime with the Frost Maiden is all snowy and of a certain theme, and as you said, your ghost clown with a laser beam may jar somewhat for most of the other players. So let's see how we can shift a few things here and there to work it out together. So
we just on this note. So one of my players in my Icewind Dale campaign wanted to play lizard folk. Mm-hmm. Lizards being cold-blooded, how do they exist in Icewind Dale where it's cold? We came up with this idea of a boon from the white dragon Cryovane. They worship the dragon. The dragon gives them a boon to allow them to live in a place that's inhospitable to lizard folks by most, logical senses.
Yeah.
And in that little moment of just being like, hey man, here's how your lizard man's going to exist where it's cold. Boom, done. We made it kind of a part of the campaign that involved all the characters. They had to fight the white dragon in a emotional moment towards the end of the campaign. But it was what started as, hey man, how could I make a lizard man work in this story? A simple solution turned into this much bigger thing where I could have just said, sorry, lizard people don't exist in the cold, figure something else out. And we would have missed out on this, not just a character arc for him, but for the whole group. The whole group had their own feelings towards the dragon Cryovane, irrespective of the lizard man's thoughts on it, who was essentially his god. Mm-hmm. And it started simply just an answer to a question to make something fit. And it grew into something larger, which is a payoff more than just, like I said, saying, nope, sorry, no lizard man, too cold, next.
Yeah. Yeah, I think treating them as opportunities to world build is probably the best way to as a DM, adapt to the macro of your players.
It's that moment of, where everybody uses it as a writing prompt. Ask me something about my homebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of it formed as a question, it's a statement from somebody who's going to be in that world. I want to make this character. How will it fit in?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've never actually thought about that. So let me figure out something here. And while you're doing that, you can just look at this and go, okay, not only am I using it to rationalize something appearing or to help my player flesh out something in their story, I'm also writing stuff that I am absolutely going to use. Somebody's given you a writing prompt of something that you didn't know was there or even had potentially even thought to think about.
Yeah.
And you've been given a prompt for something that A, provides character tie-in, which is always gold, and B, is, just like you said, an aspect of world building that you had no idea needed to be done. And now you get to do it, probably do it a little more than you would otherwise, and be happy for your player that they get to really experience something you put some thought into.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a good couple of examples of that I've done is, long story short, is my player characters are on the trail of a number of MacGuffins for like powerful artifacts, whatever it is, flavor of the week. And I'd had a couple of those chapters already set up from previous campaigns I'd run and this, that, and the other. And they're relatively tame or mundane or generic, like pick up and put down, kind of generic. And then I'd left a few open-ended to deliberately tie them into character backstories, which in of itself is pretty run rate. And then one of my players has gone with a turtle sorcerer, which is, as far as I'm aware, kind of unusual. And another one went with a warforged druid, which I have put my heart on my sleeve and say probably super unusual.
I love the Warforged Druid as a concept. I do. Keith Baker in his Eberron Dungeon Masters Guild supplement does something to kind of address that, where they're basically like Transformers when they take wild shape. Sorry to get away from your path, but I said, I think it's very cool.
Yeah, that's totally his vibe too, and he's really lent into like the kind of aesthetic theming of it being all like he's made out of like wooden vines and bark rather than kind of typical construct. But both of those posed very tricky questions to me as a DM, to be like, okay, this world I was thinking of building wasn't going to have Warforged in it, but what are the implications of having this one Warforged walking around who's made out of wood? And I've spun out a whole chapter to get one of these MacGuffins based on that Warforged, who he'd put in his backstory he had amnesia because he was been deactivated for 1,000 years or something. And I was like, perfect, you've even given me such a I can have stuff happen 1,000 years ago and it doesn't really impact the campaign now, but yada yada yada, and all that kind of stuff. And likewise with the turtle sorcerer, I was like, I wasn't really planning to have turtles wandering around, but again, what implications does that have on the world? Why aren't they maybe wandering around? Do they keep themselves to themselves on this little lost island over here, and so on and so on? So it was tricky at the time, but I am, much like you've described earlier on, super looking forward to that payoff of when those players get to those points and go, oh, that explains the last 100 sessions.
Those are the things, and the worst part is that there's a lot of stuff that Dungeon Masters plan out there that never gets picked up. Mm-hmm. And so when it does, even if it is 100 sessions in, it's still a great feeling. Hey, you guys have really been paying attention. That was a long time ago. Thanks. It's that moment's really great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a couple of those big reveals that are coming up, just to really be like, to the player, here's this paragraph of text you gave me 2 years ago. That there is, believe me, meet me halfway. Believe me, there is a payoff, and I'm fairly certain it will be worth it. And of course, they'll take some weird and wacky route to it and surprise the hell out of me. But hey, that's that's why I'm looking forward to it.
That's why it's called adaptation, or whatever you dub it to in post.
Yeah. There's one more thing that I wanted to talk about briefly, is that obviously we've come at this so far from a DM's perspective, but also the other side of that coin is as a player, it's very easy to be self-centered. Has a negative connotation, but obviously you're trying to embody a character, so it's inevitable that you're going to be very focused on what that character is doing. What I wanted to talk about is how, as a player, you could be more accommodating and flexible to the other players, and you know, say one of your traveling party does something weird. How can you, as a player, hit the middle of that Venn diagram that I was defining earlier on?
You know, we're going to come back to this one thing. I was like, I think a lot of it comes down to trust. You know, the explanation, that's what my character would do, almost universally comes at the worst time. Nobody ever uses that as a defense in a very justifiable moment. Like you just don't. That is the, hey, you need to stop being upset about what just happened for this reason. And that's just why that's used. And in a group that doesn't know each other, hasn't been along very while, you can see something that is unexpected and expect that to be the reason, but it's not. It's part of a longer character arc that the player is experiencing or part of within the narrative. This could be the first thing that it kicks off their arc in their head that you are going to watch unfold as a both viewer and participant in this endeavor of playing this game. And that's a lot of fun. And it comes with a group that's been together for a while, and you kind of can know these moments. Don't worry, he's building to something. As a player, the other thing is, just like we said at the beginning when it's from Dungeon Masters, be willing to meet people halfway. In a couple of regards. One, with maybe the style of story as it's presented to you by the Dungeon Master might not be your top hit, your number one choice. Be open to playing different styles of games. You might enjoy it. Be open to that. Be open to other play styles other than your own. This game is inherently a group of people. And we talked about earlier, basic general human decency in a group setting will go a long way. If you're playing with somebody who's new, be a little more patient. You were new to once. If playing with somebody who you think doesn't act in character, give it a little bit. They might be building towards something that you just don't see because they're really invested in their character and the role play thereof. You've done it. We've all done it. I get to do it, every episode all day. So just be open to that. Most of the issues of people that arise from, group interactions and playing D&D is more about lack of social skills than it is lack of game knowledge. Everybody, the toxic person, the gatekeeper, has nothing to do with how much they know about Dungeons and Dragons. It's because they, not an awful person, but they're not presenting themselves in a positive way. And those are the negative things. You eliminate those and everybody has a lot of really good interactions. Those paint probably not every, but a good amount of negative interactions. Nobody really gets mad about the time the druid didn't wild shape when you thought they should. But, the time somebody said racist or sexist things at your table, that's what you're going to remember.
Yeah. I've got a couple of my players. I have a delightful mix of min maxers to heavy role players and everything in between. So sometimes there is a little bit of a, why did you, through gritted teeth, why didn't you run away, or why did you attack that thing? And it's like, well, that they're still, as you said, learning the game and learning where the boundaries are. I guess there's soft boundaries in this case, of like, how far can I push it with this character and his interactions with other characters. And that is, from a DM's perspective, quite an interesting thing to watch grow, to watch mature, to see those connections being made and then perhaps broken later on because their player character dies or they do something unusual because they finally, as like your cleric example from earlier on, just hit their limit and have said enough is enough. Those are the kind of very interesting and dynamic encounters that I love to see come to fruition.
We go back to the cleric situation. There was definitely a change of the group dynamic, not the players away, out of character, but in character. There's a very dramatic change in the relationship amongst the group when the cleric killed the NPC. Mm-hmm. All of it within character. Out of character, everybody was like, wow, it was crazy. I can't believe you did that. But in character, everybody was, I thought I knew somebody. You used to be the voice of reason. You were a pacifist this entire time. And when needing to fight, you always chose a different route. And here you are unprovoked killing this major NPC. And it was, like I said, it changed obviously the next episode because we ended it right there just because nobody could think. But everybody, we go back to this thing, it wasn't just a thing that existed in a vacuum. It was a new wrinkle to a character that everybody in the group thought that they had known. And in character, everybody kind of changed accordingly. The barbarian thought it was cool as hell, embracing your anger. The wizard the artificer who's very nice and like accommodating was like, hey, it's okay. But the monk found it very disturbing and somewhat of a betrayal of trust almost. And it played out, and it still is playing out. Every time the cleric now decides whether to attack, he's back and forth on it, situational to him. Mm-hmm. It's a character dynamic between the monk and him. Why is your first time to kill the NPC? Why did you fight this time and not this time? Yeah. And it's added this dynamic to the party that didn't exist, because your party doesn't have to be happy and kumbaya. I don't think that's, I don't know, realistic is the right word to use as to how a party in Dungeons and Dragons is portrayed. But any group of people is going to have disagreements. And I think that when those surprising moments for the players and the characters happen, that just like, if you were to jump up right now and just start screaming at me, I'd be like, wow, that's really going to change the dynamic of our relationship moving forward. That I think it's good play to have those same things affect your character in game rather than just letting these shocking moments that took everybody by surprise exist in a vacuum and then have everything go back to just the way it was right before that moment happened. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, as we said earlier on, as long as it drives the narrative in a meaningful way, I'm on board in a sensible way. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we might have missed?
Like I said, hey, just thanks for having me on again. These are always fun. I like talking with you about these things. And, it's about just, like I said, our takeaway from this Dungeons and Dragons discussion is to just be a decent person within a group dynamic and work with other people, seek compromise, don't step on other people's fun, which I feel like is the majority of Dungeons and Dragons can basically be summed up into those things. You're having a bad experience, rectify most of these problems and you will get to enjoy this game. But while we're enjoying it, if you're free of those situations, just enjoy the game. Make it fun. Don't, your game at your table is the best game in the world, and everybody's table is the best game in the world because you're running it your way for your players, and whatever that looks like I said the last time I was on the show, find out what your players want and give it to them. Have a good time. Work the hardest you can to give them the story that they want and the investment they want, and everybody work together to make this game fun for everybody. That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Manny. Is there anything that you would like to promote?
Yeah, so we are on 2 Twitch streams, twitch.tv/growedupgeek. Tomorrow, well, by the time this episode airs, we'll go with that. We will be on our second campaign, a homebrew Eberron campaign I've been working on for 2 years. We're keeping the same cast from our Rime of the Frost Maiden game. That's going to have ended, and they wanted to stick around and keep playing, so we are going to adjust to this. And then in about 3 weeks, a month from the time this airs, January 12th, 2022, we're going to be debuting our limited campaign on Wednesday nights called Dynasty of Dragons that we're very, very excited about with the release of Fizzbands.
Oh, yeah.
Coming up. I've wanted to do a dragon campaign that wasn't Tyranny of Dragons, which we're not even going to get into that, but I wanted to do a dragon campaign, so we're going to do a dragon campaign in January. I'm super excited.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, as usual, and as they were on the Emotion episode, all the links will be in the episode description. So all that's left for me to say is finally, thank you ever so much for joining us again, Manny. It was, a really, again, enthusiastic and insightful talk. So I had a lot of fun.
Thanks. It's always great being here with you. I appreciate the time.
Amazing. No worries. It's my pleasure to host. Everybody at home, thank you all for listening. Please go and check out the first episode with Manny if you haven't listened to it already, all the way back in season 1. Otherwise, as usual, check out all the links in the episode description, and be sure to check out Manny's streams, especially the Dragon one, I would say, next year, with being interesting to see how the Fistband stuff turns out. So it seems like a good place to start. Otherwise, thank you all for listening, and good night. And now it's time for the Patreon shoutouts. Once again, thank you to Matt Street at mpstreet88 on Twitter for supporting the show. If you need support running your personal or business schedule, head to virtualtimehustle.com or on Instagram to make that difference between should do and done. Boss it better with support from Kat, who will help you get back that essential time you've been searching for. If you would like to support what we do and get 4 shoutouts a month, head over to patreon.com/thinkingcritically, or you can just buy me a coffee at ko-fi.com/thinkingcritically. Thank you, bye!